Welcome to Optimal Game State. Today we are going to be talking about Hobgoblin. So, Hobgoblin is a rank and file war game. And the reason I want to talk about it today is because it shares a lot of similar design concepts to Warcry. And Warcry is one of my favorite games. Obviously, Warcry is a skirmish game, and this is a big battle game. But that is perfect for it. So if you've built up a few Warcry warbands, you can actually, put those on down in a big battle, build up a big army out of it, and play out a big war game. Just as something different to do. Okay, so let's have a quick look here. So this is the general ideas around it. So it plays fast. It's model agnostic, so you can play with your own models. So if you want, you can play with Warcry ones, and it's relatively balanced in for certain reasons. Okay, so it plays fast. First off, there are 5 rounds. So Warcry is familiar with that 4 rounds. Second, it has single role combat resolution. So the typical war games we're used to from GW, you roll to hit, you roll to wound, you roll to damage, or you roll for saving throws or for armor throws. And you can add in some extra re-rolling with that. One of the great things about Hobgoblin is it bakes a lot of those numbers in. So it just has one single attack roll. So when you are rolling to do your attacks, whether it's a ranged attack or whether it's the big melee skirmish, you just roll a bunch of dice, look at the numbers, and based off that, you work out how much damage or doom in this game is done. The It's around 10 dice normally is what you roll, so that can go up or down depending, but normally it's around 10 dice, which is relatively reasonable. Range attacks are used to weaken it, so you can't typically kill a unit just with range shooting, which just avoids a scenario where everyone's kind of sitting back and plonking away at each other without actually getting in. They are scenario based, and the scenario setup does have things that the Warcry people will be familiar with. So it's got stuff like the objective, it's got deployment, it's got twists, and there's something else in there. Oh, I think, there's actually some stuff for the battlefield, for terrain, which is kind of cool. And the table just needs 16 inches between enemies. And the designer of it, Mike Hutchinson, at the back of the book, he does talk about some of the design elements. And one of them, again, the Warcraft players will be very used to, is trying to get past that turn one and try to get straight into the action and get in there. So, a lot of good stuff there. Okay, it is model agnostic. It does require some rectangle movement bases, but doesn't really care about the models on the bases. That's to say, it doesn't count. You don't track wounds or anything based on the models on it. So if you've got 20 guys on it, they will stay on it until they eventually get removed off. So if you wanted, you could have all of those models onto the base in a nice big scenic unit, and you aren't going to be pulling them off one at a time. Obviously, if you want, you can have your Warcry models sitting on a rectangle base, and then they can be loose, but they're still good. It is scale agnostic, so you can do 28 millimeter. But if you want to, you could do 10 millimeter. And recently, Wargames Atlantic have been pumping out some interesting 10 millimeter models. So you can get a Ashugaru Samurai and a Samurai Command. So you can basically get a medieval Japanese army if you wanted. It could be cool. And you could also they've just added some orcs at 10 millimeter as well. So what you could do is you could build a big army of orcs and then play them in Hobgoblin. If that's something you want to do. So that's the point here. You can put whatever models you want, just to make sure it kind of looks good, to make it a little bit easier for your opponent. Now there is a background lore. That is something that is got a lot of fun stuff in the book. You don't have to delve into it if you don't want to. So the lore doesn't dictate the rules. They're not tied together, which is kind of fun. So it lets you play the way you want to play. So in this case, if you want to take your Warcry warbands and do Age of Sigmar, but using these rules, which I think are a little bit more modern, I think it's a little bit of a faster game. It feels to me a little bit more fun. But each their own. Anyway, everyone does play from the same set of army rules. So I'm going to get into that into a bit, because I think that's kind of fun. So if your units aren't working, you can just keep the models you have and then redesign the unit's profile to get it what you want. Also, there's a lot of rock, paper, scissors going on. Every unit is weak to something and strong against another. So if your opponent is turning up with a certain list every week and just wrecking everything, you might be able to put together another list that can be tailored to defeat that list. So there's no list that's going to be unbeatable. So it just means that I guess you can just focus on having fun and not worry too much about when the next FAQ or when the next update is going to come. Okay, so one of the exciting things about it is you make your own unit profiles. So let's talk about that for a second. Okay, so here are my Slaves to Darkness models. So we've got a bunch of Chaos Knights on the right-hand side, so there's 4 of them. You can see here I've got them stuck on a base. What I've done with this, which I've been quite enjoying, is there's an MDF base. Then over that, there is a ferrous sheet. So it's a metal sheet stuck down onto it. And then I've put a little bit of texture over it again. So I was able to get some kind of earth-looking texture onto it, so it kind of looks cool. And there are magnets underneath those bases. So those models are going to stay on that rectangle. I can jiggle them a little bit, and they won't move. They'll be nice and secure. On the left-hand side, you can see I've got 2, I guess you would call them champions or leaders. So on the far left, we've got the Chaos Champion on Karkadrak. And then there's a similar equivalent, but just on a normal horsey. If you see here, the base that they have is a little bit smaller, or it's a good bit smaller, but this is actually still a unit. So as we'll see in a bit, you can make small-ish units, and depending on how you develop it out, you could just have like a small unit like this, where it's just a single guy, or you could actually, put your heroes into those bigger units and have it on the right-hand side. All right, let's have a look so we can kind of understand what's going on. So this is the same guys. We're going to look at, say, that Mounted General on the Karkadrak, and we're going to talk about these Chaos Warriors. So Chaos Warriors, the first thing we do when we're looking at one of these units is we pick from a list of the major archetypes for each of the units. Heavy Cavalry obviously makes sense here. Devastating Charge is an ability that all Heavy Cavalry will get, and that just means that they are a little bit more effective when they charge in on their first turn of attack. Elite is something I've added here, so we do get to add traits as we see fit. Elite just means they're a little bit better at fighting and melee than they would otherwise. You can also add drawbacks, negative ones. And then that's basically how you build it up. So you pick your basic profile, so Heavy Cavalry, and then you add in traits, which could be positive or negative, and that will affect the total number of points. So these Mounted Knights ended up being 600. Relatively straightforward, Heavy Cavalry with the elite trait. On the left, we have our Mounted General. So we've gone for Heavy Cavalry again. Now we've got a bunch of different things here. I'm going to skip to the last one, which is Narrow Footprint. Narrow Footprint is a bonus, so it is a positive trait, and that just means we can have that 14 millimeter wide rather than having to go for one of the larger ones. We'll talk about that later in a second. Then we've got General, Command, and Hero. They actually all come as a package deal when you have a hero. So when you have your General, you pick one guy as your General, and as we'll see there, you pick one as your banner bearer. That's always going to be in all of our armies, and there's just a few bonus traits that make your general a little bit better. Okay, so we talked about narrow footprint. That unit of Mounted Chaos Warriors are actually on the normal footprint, which is the wide. Yeah, wide. So they're 100 to 200 millimeters. And then the max depth is 40 to 160. So the smallest you can have is 100 by 40, and the biggest you can have this unit is 200 by 160. This is the kind of standard wide. And this is a range. You do not have to be exactly within these at 100 or 200. You can be 120, 140, whatever it takes to make your unit look the way you want it to be, to get the models down that you want. In this particular case, I think 200 is the stretch I've currently got for those Mounted Knights, which meant I couldn't get a fifth in if I wanted to. So what I could do, if I wanted to keep pushing out with those units, I could make them 2 units. So we could have 2 wide units, so a width of 200 and a width of 200, or we could turn them into a horde, which would just mean there'd be more room at the back, if that makes sense. But these are intentionally loose, so you can fit within those measurements just to get what you're looking for. But yeah, wide, narrow, and horde. And basically, you're always going to be between 100 and 200, are between 40 and 200 and 40 and 200 in the depth. So that kind of gives you an idea of what's going on here. And basically just a matter of working through. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at a few different units. And this is all stuff from my own collection. So these are all my Slaves to Darkness and a lot of my Cursed City and Assorted Undead collection. But we'll see it as we get into them. Okay, so on the left-hand side, we've got some Chaos Marauders. I picked light infantry as the kind of archetype for them, and then they are cowardly and unruly. So we've given them some negative traits, and those negative traits are just going to make them a little bit cheaper and a little bit more easier to, get the points in. And yeah, so there will be some drawbacks to them. I think, which one is it? I think unruly means that they don't benefit from command bonuses. And anyway, it doesn't matter. On the right-hand side, we've got our Chaos Warriors. Those are kind of our standard guys. So heavy infantry. The battle standard we're giving them for free, and that does give them command. I think it gives hero to them, but I think it's only hero 1. So I think in this case, I've added extra hero onto that, and I've made them elite, which makes them better fighters. And because they're heavy infantry, they get that tough 1. Now, what tough 1 does is tough 1 will reduce the number of damage points or doom points that they take. And each turn, and we'll get into this a little bit more, during each turn, basically you accumulate doom as the other guys are attacking you, but you'll never die until the last phase. So you always have a chance to hit back and strike back. Hero is a trait that gives you extra dice. So normally you've got like 10 dice, and then that hero 3 actually gives you 3 extra dice. So those guys are going to be rolling 13 dice, and then the elite means they're a little bit better, so that they have a lower number to do it. Command means anyone within, I think it's a certain number of inches around them, including themselves, essentially they don't break for a little bit longer for 1 more than they would normally. Okay, here we have some zombies. And this is straight out of the Cursed City box, and I put it on a board. So you can see that's just got the texture down. I haven't actually painted over that yet. Work in progress. So light infantry, makes sense for zombies. We've made them slow. We've made them hollow. Now, hollow is a bit of a weird trait. You actually get a nice bonus if your unit dies. So if your unit dies, there's a little bit of a kind of a catch-up mechanic involved. You get Mercury points, which are kind of like magic points, but they can be used for rerolls. And I think you can also get a fortune card. So there are some core cards that have some kind of random bonuses that are part of the game. But it's a catch-up mechanic. Making them hollow means that they're a little bit cheaper, but it also means we don't get that catch-up mechanic. But I think that kind of makes sense. They're just zombies. Once the zombies are dead, zombies are dead. That kind of felt right to me. In the middle, we have Gorslav the Gravekeeper, again from the Cursed City box. It made sense to me that he would be a wizard. So this is an example of a unit with a character in it, and that character is a wizard. Once you pick wizard, it costs so many points, I think it's about 200. Then you pick one of the schools. Those schools each have 3 spells. And those spells, once you get to the magic phase, you have a certain number of these Mercury points, and then you spend them on the spell, and the spell just works. There's no rolling. It's nice and simple. It's straightforward. And yeah, magic just works. It's good. But yeah, this is an example where we've got a character in the middle, and it's part of the unit. Now, this is a different example. So here we have 3 Chaos Sorcerers. What I've done here is I've lumped them together into their own single unit. They are still wizard. They will have all the ability to do wizard stuff. Now, they will count as 1 wizard for the effective rules, essentially. So they'll cast 1 spell a turn. They will have 1 school. In theory, you build up enough points. You can cast multiple if you have enough points to do it. But the point is, they are the same as Gorslav when it comes to magic, but they are also a ranged unit. So they can blast away and kind of, fire bolts from behind, which I think is quite thematic for them. So we've got that essence of them. They're sitting back, firing bolts of magic at the enemy, and then occasionally dropping a weird magical spell, doing something strange. So that's kind of fun. Okay, now here we've got maybe a little bit more thematic, and this is an Underworld's warband. So this is Prince Duval in the middle, and it's the rest of his warband from Underworld. And behind them, we've got the Cursed City. Are they the cousins? Vampires. We've got some vampires, and then I threw in some bats because vampires. Okay, so what we've done here. So there's a lot of different ways we could have approached this. I decided that I want to make this kind of an elite unit because it's Prince Duval, and he's I feel like he's kind of a badass in that big armor. Uh, so what we've got is heavy infantry that gives them tough. We've given him elite and we've given him hero. So hero gives him extra dice. Elite makes him better at rolling those dice. Now we've got some fun ones in here. So if I recall them right, Berserk means they need to advance towards an enemy if they're not engaged, and if they don't, they actually end up taking a little bit of damage, a little bit of doom. So it encourages them, makes them a little bit more reckless. So Berserk. Bloodthirsty is if they manage to basically break an enemy unit, then they get a bonus. So it's kind of I imagine them, going for a jugular and then draining some blood out to restore themselves. That's bloodthirsty. And then the last one is ravenous. So ravenous is a negative, so it's a drawback. So what happens here is if they manage to break something and there isn't anything else nearby them, I think, then they have to stick on that unit and they cannot move. So basically, if they've managed to sink the fangs in, they're going to stick there and they're not going to go away. So you kind of lose a little bit of control around them. All of this felt very thematic, and it was just me going through the traits to find out what best fit a group of vampires. All right, here we have a different approach. So this is who's the king of the cursed city, or the oh, I can't remember right now. It'll come back to me eventually. The wolf, Radagar the wolf. Okay, so this is Radagar, and these are all out of the cursed city box. So this is a full unit, and we've made it as monstrous infantry. We've made it the general. So monstrous infantry, I believe, gives them wild. Yeah. And then I give them bloodthirsty because they're vampires, like we talked about before. And because this is going to be the leader of my undead warband or my undead army, I give them general. So general comes with command 1, hero. I think that I might have upped that as well slightly. And then I added wizard at the end because, as far as I'm aware, Radakar is also a wizard. But the key part here is this is a small group, so it's only 3 of them, but they're on that normal size base. So the game only really cares about bases. So if we were to take this and give the exact same stats, we could give it to 40 clan rats, and then that would kind of make sense. So while the units would be identical, equivalent, the actual models kind of indicate how powerful each individual is. So this, having Radakar as 2 bodyguards and having them as powerful as this and hanging around on that board or on that unit makes them feel a little bit stronger. And that's kind of what we're going for. All right, and then over here, we've got just some wolves. So this is a case where, okay, this is just straight. So beasts are nimble, which means I think they're a little bit faster. Oh no, they can reform easier. That's what it is. So they can basically spin around if they want to. Skirmishers, which I think makes them a little bit more vulnerable to infantry or to range attacks. I'm not entirely sure. And then wild means I think they don't benefit from command. Oh, I should double check these. Hold on 1 second. Pause. Okay, here we go. So yeah, skirmishers are a little bit more vulnerable to ranged attacks, but they can ignore rough terrain. More the others. Wild was during the movement phase, this unit may not take any action that would result in it getting distracted, unless it also has a. Okay, so yeah, it's not going to do any range attacks. It's not going to shuffle left or back. It's not going to backwards. It's a little bit more simple, unless there's a general or character type close to it or within it, leading it. And then what was the other? Nimble. So nimble is it can reform for 2 movement points. Yeah, so that's the one that's spinning around. Now, what's interesting here is what I've done is I've made it 2 different units, but you could also make it a horde. And if you were to make it a horde, that would keep the unit itself, So the number of attacks it would have to be the same, but it would basically double how many wounds it could take. So it turns it into a bit of more of a it gives it a little bit more survivability. But then the front rank stays the same. Really, it just becomes those two bases just combine into one, if that makes sense. Okay, and what do we do next? So yeah, some basic skeletons. So we give it a battle standard. We gave it a hero, so hero 1 in the middle, and we gave it hollow like we are talking before, and we gave it slow. So yeah, very similar to the zombies, and we're just kind of picking out what we think would be appropriate, what would make it feel right. And look, if we play it and this doesn't make sense, then we can go back and we can retune things. And if we feel that it's more that it thematically it didn't work because it was more powerful, what we could try do is we could try cram more skeletons onto the base, or vice versa. If it felt like they weren't strong enough, we could reduce the number of skeletons on that one unit to kind of give us the visual indicator that they're less weak or they're stronger, if that makes sense. And yeah, this is my Slaves of Darkness all kind of lined up. So you can see we've got our light infantry to the left, our heavy infantry in the middle. Then we've got those two character general and another one just as a hero. And it's just like all heavy infantry or heavy cavalry off to the right. That's typically what it's going to look like. And you are basically able to go through your own models and work out what makes sense for you. There is a tool that goes along with it. It's really, really good. So you basically can build your army, and when you go into each unit, you can pick which traits it has, and you can work out how exactly to do it. Now, to give us a little bit more of an idea around it, I am going to scare you a little bit. I am going to show you some tables, but do not be alarmed by the tables. Once you actually get in and start playing with them, they make a lot more sense. So these are all the basic units. So these are the unit types. So you can see light infantry, ranged infantry, heavy infantry, monstrous infantry, light cavalry, which is more kind of shooting, heavy cavalry, chariot, war wagon, monster, beasts, and what's the last one? Oh, it's artillery. Yeah, I just had an icon covering it. So yeah, your cannons right in the back. And these are, you might find that certain things will make more sense for others. So like you could have those 3 chaos sorcerers as artillery that are just staying at the very back, aren't moving, and just blast away with that 48 range. So there are options. So what is of interest? So we've got speed, range for the ranged things. Strikes and courage are both 10. So strikes is the number of dice you're going to roll. So everything starts at 10. Sometimes traits will bring that up or bring that down. Courage is how many hits it can essentially take. At the end of a turn, you'll check how much doom you have. You'll compare to courage, and the courage will get modified by the command and some other things going on. But if they've got more doom than they've got courage, then they are going to be breaking at the end of turn, so they'll basically die essentially. But they do survive, so you won't have those classic cases where one army charges in, devastates the other army, and then the other army doesn't strike back. This does not happen in this game. All right, we've got a bunch of keywords. So these are all things that are innate to each of the profiles before you start doing things. Similarly, we've got the footprints. So we've got some wides, we've got some narrows. That just indicates what they will be starting with. Narrow is usually a little bit better, but you can see it's for that chariot, the war wagon, the monster, and the artillery. So that does kind of make sense. So it's things that are a little bit closer to single units. Keyword cost multiplier. So each keyword costs something. Some of them cost twice as much for certain profiles, and then the points that you start with. All right. That's not too bad. So that's kind of the base values. And then after that, you get the traits. And then there's a big, long list of traits that you can kind of add to and subtract. Now, one of the things we talked about, one of the things that I really love is that this has a single roll resolution. And this is how this game bakes it in. And this does look a little bit scary, but it is the only table in here for actually doing anything. And they have the tool online that will bring it up. And honestly, you will kind of get the hang of it eventually. Rather than having a fix to hit and then a fix to wound, or maybe modify it to wound, and then your opponent has fixed armor. It basically has all of that in, so it's just going to be one roll. So if we're taking that heavy cavalry and they are charging in against the light infantry, what we'll do is we'll look along the middle section where there's heavy cavalry, and then we will look for a column that says light infantry, and we will see that we need 3 pluses. So we'll roll our 10 dice, typically 10 dice, and then for every 3 plus, we're going to do 1 doom to the target. And then that's it. And then we move on to the next one that's actually doing anything. Nice and quick, nice and fast. It just focuses on the action, and we can get straight to it. So I have the Warcry background on this because I think this is really, really similar in many ways to Warcry. Warcry, again, has that single roll resolution where you make your roll, you then compare strength and toughness, work out what the hits and crits are, and then assign the damage. And this is very, very similar. Let's go in a little bit more detail. So this is kind of the entire game. So we've got 5 of these turns. We've skipped past the setup, but the setup is relatively basic. It's just a normal kind of back and forth, and then there's some scenarios that'll kind of modify it. Initiative, for the most part, it is, it'll kind of flip back and forth between 2 players. There is a dice involved in it, which does mean it is more likely to change in the early rounds than it is in the late rounds, if that makes sense. Okay. Then we have a magic phase. So magic is, again, you get tokens that are your points, your resources that you can use, and then you just spend them. You will have 3 spells for each of your wizards, and you just pick the spell and spend it, and that will happen. Shooting is next. For shooting, what you do is you actually roll half it starts at 5. You roll half of whatever the total attack pool basically is, because the range are a little bit worse, but you're using the same kind of target numbers. So, if for some reason we had that heavy cavalry with a ranged ability, they would still be rolling at 3 plus versus the infantry. Okay. And then it caps out at 5 doom, which is normally half. And then anything after that is gone. So basically, it does mean you have to get to melee, you have to melee it. It mentions distracted here every so often. You can only get into close combat if you aren't distracted. Okay, so a unit that is distracted may not end maneuver engaged with an enemy unit. So ranged units get distracted. That means they can't charge in. And there's a couple of different types of movement. So movement backwards and wheeling backwards. Yeah, only backwards. A full reform and the shuffling left and right. So yeah, those are a bunch of things that will mean you're distracted. Now, if you started in combat, you can do some of those, and that can be a little bit interesting. So there can be, shuffling over to the left and trying to get around so you can kind of flank people and weird stuff like that. And each of the phases do happen. So for the shooting phase, one player does all their shooting, and then the other player does all of their shooting. One player does all their movement, and the other player does all the movement. So it's not quite the I go, you go, the back and forth. It is that is I go, you go. It's not alternating activations like we would have seen in Warcry. It is I go, you go, but it is I go, you go based in phases. So it's not an entire turn and then an entire turn. And most importantly, your units always get to fight. So the Doom phase is the only time we'll be taking things away. Okay, so the combat phase, we've talked about briefly. It is literally just roll your dice, check to see what hits add a Doom, and there's a couple of rules about attacking multiple things and stuff, but it is super straightforward. And then last phase is the Doom phase. So you have a look and see which units are broken. So broken units are the ones that have more Doom or equal to their... Is it equal or greater than? I'm not quite too sure about that. It's equal to. So equal to or greater. So if the number of Doom you have is equal to or greater than your courage, you're considered to be broken. So in the Doom phase, the first thing you do is there's a little bit of panic. So nearby broken... units near a broken unit will get a little bit more Doom, and that can end up with them broken. So you can have a bit of a weird case where there's a chain of units that are just panicking across battle, which is kind of fun. You do remove broken units at this stage, so they just all go away. So if they will have survived, so if they got attacked at the start of turn 2 and they became broken, they will still get to attack back. They will still get to move around and do stuff, but then at the end of the turn they've gone. Then we've got that Death's Harvest, which is that catch-up mechanic. So it's a fortune point or 2 mercury points, unless they're broken. Sorry, unless they're hollow. And yeah, you just keep doing that. And then you, at the end of the turn, you also remove the distracted keyword. So distracted keyword, as I mentioned before, means you can't charge in, and you basically, if you build up it during a turn, you get rid of it now, just so you start to turn fresh. It's straightforward. It's nice and simple, and just kind of really focuses on the action. Was kind of fun. They have a great app along with it. So this, again, this is something that our Warcry players will be familiar with. So you've got your scenario, you've got your battlefield, you've got your deployment, and then off to the end, you actually got twists as well. These aren't crazy. It's not the first edition Warcry level of crazy encounters where you just instantly lose a game or win a game based on on how it rolls out. They just are there to add a little bit more spice, add a little bit more interest. The website is great. As I said, the army builder there is fantastic, and it also lets you keep track of your fortune cards. There is a deck that you can buy, but if you don't, you can just use normal playing cards and use the website to keep track of yours and work out what they are. So you'll draw, the 2 of hearts, and then 2 of hearts will correspond to a certain ability, and then you can reveal them later. Anyway, I love this game. I think it's great. It is a lot more straightforward and a lot more fun than any time I've tried to play Age of Sigmar, which, you might have your preferences, and that's perfectly fine. Right now, I enjoy Hobgoblin more than I enjoy Age of Sigmar. And that's playing with Age of Sigmar models. So I just, as I said, I feel that this has a lot of shared DNA with Warcry. I feel Warcry is a modern version of wargaming and has, kind of condensed and crunched things down for a lot more of streamlined, fast, and brutal experience. Obviously, everyone is up to their own opinion. But please do have a look at this one, check it out, and see if this might be something for you. So in the links, what I'll do is I'll have a link to Mike Hutchinson's YouTube, where you can see him step you through the rules. So hopefully I've given you a bit of a feel for it, and then you can kind of get it. And then he's also got a quick start PDF that you can download. All right, that's everything for me. So have a great week.
Thanks for making it all the way to the end. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Each week, I put up a new video talking about one of Games Workshop's specialist games. The goal is always to try and make the best possible 2-player experience. If this is something you'd find interesting, please subscribe to the channel and comment to let me know what you'd like to see in future.